She missed every shot on purpose, not because she couldn't shoot, but because she was waiting, watching, calculating. 12 cocky trainees laughed at the observer in borrowed fatigues. They didn't know the quiet blonde had more range time than all of them combined. Her hands learned recoil before they learned handwriting. Tomorrow, they'd hand her a real rifle. Tomorrow, they'd expect failure. But Sarah Mitchell wasn't here to impress them. She was here to prove a promise. Forged in blood, buried with her father. And when the shot finally came, they wouldn't just eat their words. They'd learn the most dangerous soldier is the one who doesn't need to prove anything. The Quantico Advanced Marksmanship Facility opened its doors at 5:30 every morning, but Sarah arrived at 5. Her body wanted to move into the position it knew by heart, the one her father had drilled into her muscle memory through 10,000 repetitions, but she forced herself to remain awkward, uncertain. The first shot went wide right, missing the target completely at 200 yards. The laughter erupted immediately. "Academic marksmanship at its finest," someone shouted. Morrison strutted over, took the rifle from her hands with exaggerated care, and demonstrated what real shooting looked like. His grouping at 300 yards was textbook perfect, a tight cluster that any instructor would praise. "That's how you handle American steel, sweetheart." He handed the rifle back with a condescending smile. "Your turn, Professor." Sarah returned to her position, settled the rifle against her shoulder, and proceeded to miss again. Low left this time, then high, then wide right again. But Reynolds, standing behind the firing line with decades of experience reading shooters, noticed something others missed. Her misses weren't random. They formed a pattern around the target. Each shot precisely placed exactly where it shouldn't be. His eyes narrowed as he watched her breathing, perfect even in supposed failure. Her trigger squeeze, smooth despite the missed shots. Her stance, too solid for a beginner despite its acted awkwardness. "3 strikes and you're out," Morrison announced to the gathering crowd. Other trainees had abandoned their own practice to watch the entertainment. "Maybe stick to books, sweetheart. Leave the real work to those of us who've earned the right to be here." The insult hit its mark, not because it wounded her pride, but because it echoed every rejection letter she'd received from sniper schools. Lacks combat experience, insufficient qualifications, not suited for this position. The same system her father had died serving had deemed her unworthy of formal recognition. Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly, her fingers drumming once against the rifle stock in a rhythm her father would have recognized, the Morse code for patience. Captain Martinez arrived at the range, drawn by the commotion. He observed Sarah's next shot, another deliberate miss, and exchanged glances with Reynolds. "That's not amateur form," he whispered. "Look at her stance. Perfect isosceles, breathing pattern, textbook. She's missing on purpose. But why?" The question hung between them as Morrison escalated his performance. "Maybe Daddy didn't teach you right," he said, and Sarah's entire body went still. Not the stillness of embarrassment, but the absolute motionlessness of a predator deciding whether to strike. "Daddy's teaching you to be better than them," Colonel Mitchell's voice from a rainy afternoon. Sarah at 12, both of them soaked, but still shooting. Not just at shooting, at patience, at choosing your moment. Her knuckles whitened on the rifle grip, the only external sign of the fury building behind her controlled expression. Morrison, oblivious to the danger, proposed his challenge. "One more chance, but let's make it interesting." He gestured grandly at his prized Accuracy International. "Tell you what, Professor, I'll even let you use the SEAL rifle. Hit center mass at 600 yards or leave permanently. If by some miracle you succeed, drinks are on me. Did you ever bet against someone only to discover you never understood the game?" Sarah accepted with a single nod, taking the Accuracy International with the reverence it deserved. The weight was familiar. Her father had trained her on a similar model, though she'd never mentioned that. Morrison's crew gathered closer, phones ready to record her failure. The wind had picked up, enough to push a bullet significantly off course at that distance. Sarah settled into position, and everything changed. Her breathing shifted from controlled to mechanical, each inhale and exhale timed to her heartbeat. Her body found its true form, the one carved by 10,000 hours of practice. The sight picture materialized in her scope with the fluid certainty of someone coming home. The crowd fell silent, sensing something they couldn't name. She fired. The shot seemed to miss completely, not even hitting the berm behind the target. Morrison exploded with laughter. "Didn't even hit dirt." "Pack it up, Professor. Time to go home." Sarah stood, began walking toward the exit, saying nothing. But the range safety officer's voice crackled over the radio, confusion evident. "Sir, you need to see this." The spotter scope was checked, rechecked, then checked again. Morrison had been watching the wrong target. Sarah hadn't shot at 600 yards. She'd hit the 1,000-yard target instead. Perfect headshot through the intersection of the crosshairs painted on the head. In gusting wind, with a rifle she'd supposedly never handled before. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete it seemed to swallow sound. Martinez grabbed the range phone, his voice urgent. "I need personnel files. Search for any Sarah, sniper background, classified if necessary." Morrison stood frozen, staring through the spotter scope at an impossible shot made with impossible ease. Sarah paused at the exit, her back to them all, savoring a moment of vindication that tasted like cordite and justice. In her mind, her father's voice whispered the words he'd said 1,000 times. "Let your shooting do the talking, baby girl. Standards speak louder than words." She'd maintained the standard. Now they would learn what that meant. Martinez's fingers flew across the keyboard in his office, searching through personnel databases with growing urgency. The name Sarah Mitchell appeared on his screen, wrapped in classification warnings and black redaction bars. Father, Colonel James Mitchell, Marine Corps Special Operations, Sniper Team Leader. Status, killed in action, Afghanistan, 2019, Operation Red Wing. The file photo showed a man with Sarah's eyes and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much through a scope. A footnote caught his eye. Accuracy International AXMC.338, serial hatch AX3827. Originally requisitioned for SEAL team evaluation, transferred to Colonel Mitchell for operational testing, Kandahar Province. The same model Sarah had just used. The coincidence was too perfect. Martinez reached for his secure phone, dialing a Pentagon number he rarely used. "I need confirmation on Mitchell Sarah, daughter of Colonel James Mitchell." The voice on the other end went silent before responding. "That file is sealed. Why are you asking?" "Because she just made an impossible shot with training equipment." Another pause. "We'll call you back." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat across from Martinez in his office, her hands folded in her lap with the stillness of someone who'd learned patience through pain. "Your father was Raptor 6, Martinez said, watching her reaction. The call sign hit her like a physical blow, though only her breathing betrayed it, catching for half a second before resuming its rhythm. "Yes, sir. He taught me everything." The words came out steady, but Martinez caught the weight behind them. Everything meant more than shooting. It meant discipline, sacrifice, and a standard of excellence that had been passed from father to daughter like a family heirloom made of steel and determination. Martinez's initial skepticism showed in his posture. Being trained by a legend doesn't automatically qualify someone for instructor positions. "We have protocols, standards, requirements." Sarah's response was measured. "I understand that, sir. I'm not asking for special treatment." Martinez studied her carefully. "Then what are you asking for?" Sarah met his gaze. "A chance to prove that skill matters more than paperwork. That excellence can exist outside official channels. Martinez leaned back, considering. The 1,000-yard shot with iron sights had been impossible, but one shot didn't make an instructor. Show me your competition records. Sarah produced a folder she'd brought but never planned to reveal. Years of wins under her mother's maiden name. Scores that would qualify for Olympic trials. Martinez's eyebrows rose with each page. These are civilian competitions. Different world from military applications. Respectfully, sir. Physics doesn't care about the shooter's uniform. Martinez tapped the file. How did you really get access to this facility? Academic research doesn't usually include live fire exercises. Sarah's honesty was calculated. My advisor pulled strings, said I was studying the psychology of elite performance, that I needed to observe training methods firsthand. She walked the empty corridors, studying the portraits of snipers who had earned their place on these walls, through blood and precision. The building smelled of gun oil and ambition, a combination that had drawn her here under false pretenses. Gun oil and coffee, baby girl. That's what morning smells like. Her father's voice echoed from a memory 20 years old, his massive hands steadying her 6-year-old grip on a .22 rifle. Now breathe with it, not against it. Her cover story was bulletproof. Georgetown University International Relations Program, a thesis on military training psychology, an advisor who'd served with the facility commander 20 years ago in Iraq. The paperwork was real, the permissions authentic, the liability waivers signed in triplicate. The live fire was supposed to be a one-time accommodation. Let the researcher experience the pressure to better understand it. Martinez's expression suggested he wasn't buying it entirely. And your advisor knew your background? Sarah shook her head. He knew my father served. Nothing more. I wanted to earn my way in, not trade on a ghost's reputation. Sergeant Thompson entered without knocking, stopping dead when he saw Sarah. Holy shit, you're Jimmy's girl. The recognition was immediate, visceral. You have his eyes and his steady hands. Thompson turned to Martinez. Colonel Mitchell saved my life twice. Afghanistan, 2013 and 2017. The stories poured out. 1,600-yard shot through a sandstorm to eliminate a Taliban commander about to execute prisoners. But Thompson also added crucial context. Jimmy didn't just shoot. He could read wind like scripture, calculate ballistics in his head faster than computers, taught us that shooting was about mathematics and patience, not just trigger pull. He used to say any fool can point and shoot. True snipers solve problems with bullets. How do you measure a legacy written in wind readings and trigger pulls? Sarah pulled out a worn notebook, her father's handwriting visible on pages yellow with age. He made me calculate every shot before taking it. By the time I was 16, I could work a firing solution for 2,000 yards in my head. Martinez examined the notebook, seeing complex calculations that most snipers needed computers for. This explains the shooting, but teaching requires different skills. Sarah nodded. Which is why I've been coaching junior competitors for 5 years. 3 of my students made national teams. Martinez's resistance was weakening but not broken. I need more than history and potential. I need to see consistent performance under pressure. The classified file on Martinez's desk drew Sarah's attention. May I? He hesitated, then pushed it toward her. Sarah opened it carefully, scanning until she found one line that made her breath catch. Remained in position, ensuring civilian evacuation. KIA. Her tears came silently, just 2, before she regained control. If something happens to me, her father had said during their last training session before his deployment, promise me you'll keep the standards, not for me, for everyone who comes after. He stayed to protect others. That's all I needed to know. Thompson added quietly, 200 Afghan civilians made it out because he held that position. Could have extracted. Chose not to. Sarah closed the file with steady hands. Then I'll honor that choice by maintaining his standards. Martinez made a decision that would require political capital to defend. 1-month probationary period. You assist with training, demonstrate consistency, prove you can teach as well as shoot. Any issues, you're gone. No special treatment because of your father. Sarah stood, extending her hand. I wouldn't want special treatment, sir. His shadow is long enough without me hiding in it. Word of Sarah's identity spread through the facility like wildfire, but Martinez's decision came with conditions that prevented immediate elevation. Morrison found out from an instructor who'd served with Raptor 6. That woman is Colonel Mitchell's daughter? The same Colonel Mitchell with a Medal of Honor recommendation? His transformation began not with panic, but with gradual realization. He'd mocked someone who'd been training since childhood, who'd learned from the best, who'd chosen to hide her ability to test their character. The implications settled over him like a weight. She could have destroyed us on day one. Instead, she observed, measured, evaluated. Martinez's terms were non-negotiable. Sarah would assist regular classes, demonstrate techniques, but not lead. She'd participate in every evaluation, prove her consistency wasn't luck. Most importantly, she'd have to show she could transfer her skills to others. The Pentagon callback came that afternoon. Mitchell's daughter has no official military record, but her civilian achievements are significant. Martinez's response was careful. I'm giving her a probationary period, following all protocols. The voice on the other end paused. Raptor 6 saved a lot of lives. His daughter deserves a fair chance, but fair only. The message was clear. No shortcuts, but no unnecessary obstacles either. Thompson's final words that day would echo through Sarah's probationary period. Your father didn't just teach shooting, he taught judgment. When to shoot, when not to, when to wait, when to act. If you inherited that, you'll do fine. If not, all the skill in the world won't matter. Sarah understood. Her father's legacy wasn't just in her trigger finger. It was in knowing when to reveal her abilities and when to conceal them, when to push and when to let others discover truth at their own pace. The real test hadn't been making impossible shots. It had been knowing when to stop missing on purpose. Dawn broke 3 weeks into Sarah's probationary period, with her standing among million-dollar rifle systems like she'd been born to them. Every morning, she demonstrated the same consistency. 800 yards, 1,200 yards, 1,500 yards, all with the same mechanical precision. But Martinez had been watching for more than accuracy. He'd been studying her interactions with struggling trainees, her patience with questions, her ability to diagnose and correct problems in others' techniques. The evaluation wasn't just about shooting anymore. Morrison had become an unofficial advocate, his transformation complete but hard-earned. She doesn't just tell you what you're doing wrong, he explained to newer trainees. She shows you why your body wants to do it wrong and how to reprogram the instinct. The morning Martinez made his decision, Sarah was working with a trainee who couldn't hit beyond 600 yards. Instead of taking the rifle and demonstrating, she lay beside him, talking through his process. You're fighting the rifle. It's not your enemy. Breathe with it, not against it. Your heartbeat is making you pull left. Time your shots between beats. The same words her father had whispered to her at 8 years old, his hand gentle on her back, teaching her to find the stillness between heartbeats. The trainee's next shot hit 700 yards, center mass. His shock was evident, but Sarah had already moved to the next struggler. Martinez watched her teach without ego, correct without condescension, elevate others without diminishing herself. He'd seen excellent shooters before. Excellent teachers were rarer. The advanced demonstration that would seal Sarah's position came without warning. Martinez assembled the full instructor panel and announced an unscheduled evaluation. Mitchell, you're up. Full spectrum demonstration. Sarah nodded, understanding this was her final test. The setup was deliberately challenging. Multiple targets at varying distances, unknown wind conditions, limited time, and a requirement to call each shot before taking it. But the real test was the running commentary Martinez required. Explain every decision, every calculation, make your process visible for training purposes. Sarah settled behind the rifle and began speaking in the calm, measured tone of a professor. First target, 800 yards. Wind is shifting. See how the grass moves differently at different distances? That tells us the wind speed changes between here and the target. I'm adjusting for 3 different wind speeds. She called the shot placement, fired, and hit exactly where promised. The panel exchanged glances. Most snipers could make the shot. Few could explain it so clearly while doing it. 1,200 yards brought new challenges. Sarah continued her commentary. The cold morning air affects the bullet differently than warm air. The barrel is still cool, so the first shot will hit slightly high. At this distance, even Earth's rotation matters. We call it the Coriolis effect. She fired another perfect shot, then immediately began explaining how the barrel would warm up and change the next shot's trajectory. Would you trust someone who had everything to prove and chose to prove nothing? The 1,500-yard shot drew everyone available. Sarah's commentary never wavered. This is where patience matters most. At this distance, the bullet takes nearly 3 seconds to reach the target. A lot can change in 3 seconds. She calculated aloud, making complex physics sound simple. The shot split the air, traveling nearly a mile before impact. Perfect hit, but more importantly, perfect explanation. But what really opened the doors was her advisor's call to Martinez. She's studying the psychological factors that separate elite shooters from standard marksmen. Purely observational. She won't touch a weapon. The facility had hosted academic observers before, usually retired military writing books or Pentagon consultants studying training efficiency. A graduate student researching military psychology wasn't unusual enough to raise flags. Everything about her presence was legitimate except the reason she'd come. When the others arrived, Sarah had already positioned herself in the back corner of the briefing room, notebook open, pen ready. She'd chosen her clothes carefully, unremarkable civilian attire that suggested academic naivety. Morrison entered with his usual swagger, his crew trailing behind like pilot fish following a shark. She'd made the invisible visible, turned instinct into curriculum. Martinez addressed the panel that afternoon, 3 weeks of consistent performance, every shot documented. More importantly, look at these numbers. He displayed training statistics. Trainees under Sarah's instruction had improved their averages by 40%. She wasn't just maintaining her father's personal standards. She was creating new marksmen who understood why, not just how. The vote was unanimous. Sarah would receive full instructor credentials, advanced placement authorization, and something more. The panel had recommended her for an honor rarely given to living recipients. Official inheritance of a call sign. Raptor 6 would live again. Morrison's advocacy had been crucial. In closed session, he'd admitted his initial prejudice and detailed his transformation. I've been in this game 12 years. Thought I knew what excellence looked like. She didn't just prove me wrong about her abilities. She proved me wrong about my own. Made me better by showing me how small my perspective was. His testimony carried weight because of his honesty about his own failings. Other instructors shared similar stories. Sarah's method of teaching through demonstration rather than humiliation, building confidence while maintaining standards, had changed the facility's culture without anyone realizing it was happening. The ceremony was scheduled for the following week, but Sarah's true validation came sooner. Brooks arrived that morning with his Special Forces team, carrying the same arrogance Morrison had once worn. When he dismissed Sarah as a quota hire, the entire facility held its breath. They'd seen this play before, but now they waited for a different ending. Sarah's response surprised everyone. She didn't hide her abilities or set up elaborate demonstrations. She simply said, "Sergeant Brooks, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm here to make you better, not to impress you. Your ego is your business. Your shooting is mine." The direct approach, backed by 3 weeks of proven results, shifted the dynamic immediately. When Brooks persisted in challenging her qualifications, Sarah made the 2,000-yard shot that would become facility legend. But this time, she explained every calculation first, called the exact impact point, and made it look routine rather than impossible. The shot was the same impossibility, but the context had changed. She'd earned the right to display excellence without apology. Brooks' transformation was faster than Morrison's because the environment had already changed. He wasn't fighting Sarah alone, but the entire facility's recognition of her abilities. His apology came not from fear of career damage, but from genuine recognition of his error. Martinez's final evaluation was simple. You've exceeded every metric. But more than that, you've proven that excellence can exist outside traditional channels, that merit transcends background. Your father would be proud. Sarah's response revealed her journey. He'd be proud that I waited, that I didn't use his name to open doors, that I earned this by being better, not by being his daughter. The facility had become her domain not through nepotism or special treatment, but through 3 weeks of relentless consistency and patient teaching. She'd transformed doubters into advocates, mockers into students, and a culture of ego into one of excellence. The shot had been fired on day 1, but the impact had taken 3 weeks to arrive. Like all good long-range operations, patience had been the key to precision. 3 months transformed the facility into something Colonel Mitchell would have recognized. Excellence as standard, not exception. Sarah moved through the ranges like a ghost with substance, teaching through demonstration, building snipers who understood that precision was philosophy, not just technique. The morning staff Sergeant Brooks graduated from her advanced course. He wasn't the same man who'd dismissed her as a diversity hire. His final evaluation showed the transformation. Instructor Mitchell taught me that arrogance is just fear wearing a uniform. I came here thinking I knew everything. I leave knowing I've just started learning. His team had undergone similar changes, their special forces swagger replaced by something deeper, confidence built on competence rather than volume. The ceremony transferring Raptor 6 to Sarah was attended by brass who'd flown in specifically for the event. The Pentagon had approved the unprecedented transfer of a call sign from father to daughter, recognizing that some legacies transcended regulation. But Sarah had insisted on one condition: no speeches about her father's heroics, no tearful remembrances. Just the simple acknowledgement that standards had been maintained. Martinez understood. The ceremony was brief, respectful, and focused on the future rather than the past. Raptor 6 lives, he announced, not in memory, but in practice, not in stories, but in standards maintained daily. Sarah accepted the designation with a single nod, then returned to the range. There were trainees waiting, but the real test of her impact came with the next wave of arrivals. Word had spread through military channels about the female instructor who could make impossible shots while explaining the physics behind them. Some came to challenge her, others to learn, but all left changed. The facility's culture had shifted so completely that new arrivals questioning Sarah's credentials were corrected by other trainees before instructors could intervene. She's Raptor 6 became explanation enough, not because of her father, but because she'd earned it through months of consistent excellence. The old guard had become her fiercest defenders, their initial mockery transformed into protective respect. Morrison, now a senior instructor himself, had implemented Sarah's teaching methods across all courses. We used to teach shooting, now we teach thinking. The rifle is just the tool, the mind is the weapon. His transformation from mocker to advocate had become facility legend, told to new arrivals as a cautionary tale about assumptions. Sarah never mentioned their first encounter, allowing Morrison to share his growth without shame. She understood that true teaching meant letting others own their journey from ignorance to understanding. Her silence on the matter spoke louder than any rebuke could have. The Afghan veteran who arrived 6 months later brought closure Sarah hadn't known she needed. He carried a worn photo of her father's position during Operation Red Wing, showing the impossible angle he'd held to cover the evacuation. Your father had 32 confirmed kills that day. Each one saved civilian lives. But that's not why I came. He produced a letter, warned from reading. Your father wrote this the night before the mission. Asked me to deliver it if something happened. Sarah read her father's words through tears she didn't try to hide. Baby girl, if you're reading this, it means I kept my promise to protect others. Keep yours to maintain standards. Not for me, but for those who'll come after. Excellence isn't inherited, it's chosen daily. She remembered the last time she'd seen him, the morning of deployment. He'd made her breakfast, terrible eggs, perfect coffee, and they'd sat in silence until he spoke. Whatever happens, you're already everything I hoped you'd be. Now go be everything you're meant to be. Would you trust someone who chose excellence without recognition over recognition without excellence? Sarah folded the letter carefully, thanked the veteran, and returned to her duties. But something had shifted. The last weight of proving herself worthy of her father's legacy had lifted. She wasn't carrying Raptor 6 anymore. She was Raptor 6, earned through her own merit, validated by her own achievements. That afternoon, she worked with a struggling trainee, patiently correcting form, explaining physics, building confidence. The same work she'd done yesterday would do tomorrow, because standards didn't maintain themselves. The offers continued to come. Pentagon positions, special operations slots, opportunities to add operational experience to her teaching credentials. Sarah declined them all with the same explanation. My war is here. Every sniper I train properly is a life saved somewhere down the line. My father eliminated threats. I'm trying to create protectors. Martinez supported her decision, understanding that Sarah's impact multiplied through every student she touched. She'd trained over 200 marksmen in 6 months, each carrying forward not just techniques but philosophy. He noticed her immediately, the way predators notice anything that doesn't belong in their territory. The smirk that crossed his face was predictable. She'd seen it 1,000 times on 1,000 different faces. The expression of a man who'd already decided her worth based on her gender and her perceived purpose. Master Sergeant Reynolds called the room to order and made the introduction she'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Sarah stood when asked, offered 3 words that revealed nothing. Sarah, here to learn. The simplicity of it seemed to amuse Morrison even more. He whispered something to the Marine beside him, and they both chuckled. She sat back down and resumed taking notes, her handwriting neat and measured, recording technical specifications about wind drift and bullet drop that she could recite in her sleep. The Mitchell method had become standard curriculum, focusing on understanding over memorization, patience over speed. Brooks returned a year later as an instructor candidate, specifically requesting assignment under Sarah. I need to learn to teach what you taught me. My team's performance increased 60% after your course, but more than that, our judgment improved. We think before we shoot now. Sarah accepted him with the same quiet professionalism she showed everyone. The cycle continued. Excellence creating excellence, standards maintaining standards, silence speaking louder than any boast. The facility wall had added her photo next to her father's, but Sarah never looked at it. The past was honored. The present was what mattered. Have you ever seen someone become exactly who they were always meant to be? Dawn found Sarah at the 2,000-yard range, sending impossible shots into impossible targets while new trainees watched in awe. The radio crackled with routine authority. Raptor 6 congressional delegation arriving for demonstration. Sarah chambered another round, settled her breathing, answered without leaving her scope. Send them to range 4. Standards don't pause for politics. The rifle spoke its single word of excellence, and 2,000 yards away, another perfect shot found its mark. Behind her, Morrison explained to the new arrivals what they were witnessing. Not just marksmanship, but mathematics made lethal. Not just shooting, but problem-solving at the speed of trigger pull. The congressional delegation included a senator who'd known her father. I voted against female sniper integration 3 times, he admitted privately to Sarah. Thought it would lower standards. Sarah's response was characteristic. Standards aren't lowered by who maintains them, Senator. They're lowered by those who assume they can't be maintained. The senator left with changed perspectives and recommendations for policy reform. Another victory won through patience and performance rather than politics. Sarah returned to her students, her war, her purpose. Because legends weren't built on single shots or dramatic moments. They were built one standard at a time, one student at a time, one trigger pull that carried the weight of every one that came before. The morning mist wrapped around Sarah like her father's memory, present but intangible, felt but never fully grasped. She stood among monuments to warriors, having become one herself through teaching rather than combat. The ultimate victory wasn't in the shots she'd made, but in the shooters she'd created. Each of them carrying forward standards they'd once thought impossible, now considered baseline. The ghost of Raptor 6 had found new life in hands that would never let it fade. What's your take on earning respect through actions rather than words? Because in the end, Sarah Mitchell had answered that question with every shot, every lesson, every standard maintained without compromise. She'd simply lived it, one perfect shot at a time, building a legacy that would outlive any single trigger pull. Have you ever had to hide your true self to see who people really are? The question formed in her mind as she watched Morrison demonstrate his knowledge for his followers, explaining concepts she'd mastered before he'd ever enlisted. The equipment room was a shrine to precision, rifles worth more than most people's cars lined up like sleeping dragons. Morrison made sure she noticed him handling the most expensive piece, a custom Accuracy International, the SEAL's gun of choice, as he loudly announced to anyone within earshot. This beauty right here, same model SEAL Team 6 uses, 30 grand of pure precision. He caressed the barrel with reverence. Course, takes years to master something like this. Sarah made another note, her expression carefully neutral. Reynolds announced range day for tomorrow, with the reluctant addition that their observer would be permitted supervised shots for her research. The words supervision and research dripped with condescension, but Sarah simply nodded and made another note. Morrison's reaction was immediate and predictable. This should be entertaining. His crew agreed, already planning tomorrow's show. Sarah spent the rest of the day asking carefully calculated questions, each one designed to seem naive while revealing just enough technical knowledge to create confusion. She asked about barrel harmonics in a way that suggested she'd read about them in a textbook. She inquired about minute of angle calculations with the tone of someone who'd never held a rifle. The instructors answered patiently at first, then with growing uncertainty as her questions became more specific. By evening, Reynolds pulled Martinez aside. There's something off about her questions, too specific for a civilian, too academic for someone with training. Martinez shrugged it off. Probably just a gun enthusiast with a research grant. Her advisor vouched for her. Said, she's obsessive about her research, reads everything. But Reynolds couldn't shake the feeling, especially after Sarah had quietly corrected his explanation of Coriolis effect on long-range shots, then immediately deflected when he'd asked how she knew. The other trainees had started calling her professor, not with respect, but with the kind of mockery reserved for anyone who lived in theory instead of practice. Sarah accepted the title without reaction, continued her careful performance of incompetence mixed with knowledge, setting the stage for tomorrow's revelation. What would happen when they discovered the observer had been observing them all along? That question hung in the air like cordite after a shot, invisible but unmistakable. Sarah retired to her temporary quarters, spread the range specifications across her bed, and studied them with the intensity of someone preparing for war. Because tomorrow she would give them exactly what they expected to see. Until she didn't. 6 a.m. arrived wrapped in cold mist that clung to the rifle range like a burial shroud. Sarah appeared in borrowed military fatigues that hung loose on her frame, the fabric still creased from storage. Morrison's crew had already claimed the best positions, their rifles gleaming with the care of men who understood that weapons were extensions of their will. They watched her approach with the anticipation of wolves watching a lamb wander into their territory. Safety first, college girl, Morrison called out, his voice carrying across the range with practiced authority. Let me show you how to hold it so the recoil doesn't break your shoulder. The others laughed, the sound sharp and cruel in the morning air. Sarah accepted the basic training rifle, a standard M4 that had seen better decades, while the others cradled their precision instruments. She let Morrison position her hands, adjust her stance, explain the fundamentals of breathing, and trigger control as if she were a child learning to ride a bicycle. Let them teach you wrong first, her father had said during one of their secret sessions, Sarah at 14, already out shooting most adults. Then you'll know exactly what mistakes they're making with their own form.